300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a jam-packed Wednesday morning. A lot of breaking news, both in tennis, in soccer, not to mention some interesting stuff in football coming up with the Jacksonville Jaguars. But we start with the New England Patriots, and the situation that they're in right now just keeps getting a little bit more muddled, a little bit muddier every single day. Cam Newton expected to miss the next 5 days because of COVID protocols, and obviously the Patriots have come out and expressed their frustrations with him. Can this be an opportunity to see a guy like Mac Jones come in and start? Well, Bill Belichick actually just came out yesterday, interestingly enough, and acknowledged that this actually could be a really good opportunity for a guy like Mac Jones to come in and potentially get the starting job. And normally Bill Belichick doesn't disclose, he doesn't reveal this type of information to the media, at least not willingly. He has to be kind of held against his own will. But the interesting thing is, in life, most of the biggest breaks aren't just because of your skill, because of your talent. If you talk to any successful person, they'll tell you that in life, most of your biggest breaks come because of good fortune, timing, and opportunity. You have to be fortunate. You have to have some good luck when it comes to getting a break. And you happen to be maybe the right place at the right time. You're talking to the right executive at the right moment. You happen to bump into a potential future boss at a bar, anywhere. Doesn't matter. Serendipity works in mysterious ways. But the thing about it is, you have to be prepared for those opportunities when you're presented with them. Because you can't just be having that good fortune, having that good opportunity. You have to be ready. You have to be absolutely ready. And for a lot of players, this applies directly to sports, because what we see is that in so many sports, especially in football, when you have a 50-man roster and it's so much about competitiveness, competition, so many guys vying for the same positions, oftentimes it comes down to a coach just giving a player just one opportunity that they were deprived of potentially somewhere else. Oftentimes that's exactly what it comes down to. Just one good coach that says, you know what, I want to give this guy an opportunity. Maybe they're normally a bench player. Maybe they're normally a third stringer or a guy who was undrafted or a walk-on, and giving themselves an opportunity. There's so many examples in the NFL. Ike Taylor, who won 2 Super Bowls with the Pittsburgh Steelers. This was a guy who was a walk-on as a junior at Louisiana Lafayette. He ends up getting drafted in 2003 in the 4th round by the Steelers, goes on to have a 12-year career, 12-year career, 2 Super Bowl championships. Steven Gostkowski, one of the best NFL kickers of all time, was a walk-on at Memphis. Antonio Brown was a walk-on at Central Michigan. J.J. Watt was a walk-on at the University of Wisconsin, and some coach, some scout saw them and said, you know what, we want to give you a chance to succeed, to flourish, to thrive, when some of these other coaches may have not given those same individuals an opportunity anywhere else. And when we think about even the Philadelphia Eagles as the most recent example, when they won the Super Bowl in 2017, I think they were probably, I would say, distraught at the time when Carson Wentz suffered his torn ACL 14 games into the season, when the Eagles had the best record in the NFL, and he was the leading candidate for NFL MVP. And then happens to be that you have a backup in Nick Foles, who's at the right place at the right time, given the right opportunity with the right offensive coordinator and Frank Reich and the right head coach and Doug Peterson, and he leads them to a Super Bowl. Just happens to be at the right place at the right time. And so now when we think about Mac Jones, if you really think about it, this makes perfect sense for Mac Jones. Because if we chronicle his entire career, how he's got into this point, it's all been because of good fortune and good luck, in addition to the timing and his skill. When he was at Alabama, no one knew about Alabama, or about, everyone knows about Alabama. No one knew about Mac Jones at Alabama before Tua got hurt. He was Tua's backup. Then Tua underwent the hip surgery. He was thrown into the fire for the final 5 games of the season for Alabama. He goes 4-1. The only loss that he suffered came against his arch rival Auburn, 48-45, because his field goal kicker couldn't make a 30-yard chip shot on the road at Jordan-Hare. And then the following season, there's a QB competition between him, who was supposed to be potentially the favorite, the prohibitive favorite to be the starter the following season, and the 5-star recruit Bryce Young out of Mater Dei in Southern California. And he wins the job, and he goes undefeated, and he leads Alabama to a national championship. So when we think about Mac Jones, this is how Mac Jones would be given an opportunity like this. These would be the circumstances in which the starting quarterback, the incumbent in Cam Newton, would, of course, be absent because he had contracted COVID, or at least was in the vicinity and got exposed to someone who did contract COVID, and so he needed to remove himself. That would be the situation in the scenario and the circumstance in which Mac Jones would be given an opportunity like this. Because the reality is no one would have known about Mac Jones or how valuable he may have been had it not been for Tua's injury. And now you fast forward to his position right now with the New England Patriots, with the mindset of his head coach, who's extremely competitive. And this was a quarterback battle that was already extremely heated and extremely tight. It's not like Cam Newton had an overwhelming majority in his camp preaching for him to be the starter as opposed to Mac Jones. I have a feeling that there were a number of people, there's a good faction of not only media experts and pundits, but probably his own teammates that really like Mac Jones and think he's got the temperament, think he has the skill to be given an opportunity like this. And now with Cam Newton, who's essentially a lame duck quarterback in the sense that he's not part of the Patriots' long-term plans. Maybe he might be the starter this year, maybe, but we know moving forward in the bigger picture, Cam Newton isn't the face of the New England Patriots. So with all that as the context, now Mac Jones is able to seize this opportunity, and in a way, it had nothing to do with his own doing. It had everything to do with Cam Newton and his decision to probably not get a COVID vaccine shot. And the unfortunate thing for Cam Newton is he'd actually been playing really well. He'd been playing pretty well this preseason. It's not one of those situations where Mac Jones was killing it and lighting it up and Cam Newton was stinking the bed. No, he was playing really well. He was looking efficient. He was looking strong, looking confident. And again, we don't know what type of impact and the effects that COVID had on Cam last year, because before he contracted COVID, he was playing really well. But I highlight this because you have a coach in Bill Belichick who just saw his longtime running mate in Tom Brady go to Tampa Bay and win a Super Bowl within his first year. You know that the fire, that those coals inside of him are burning. He wants to win now. He's a competitive guy. He wants to win now. And while he may believe that Cam Newton is the better talent and should probably be the starter week 1, he also realizes I can't afford to have any distractions, any inconveniences, anything that can compromise my chance on a day-to-day basis of getting this team better and getting this team ready to compete for a Super Bowl. And the unfortunate thing for Cam Newton is when you contract COVID and you're forced to sit out for an extended period of time, that inevitably and inherently is a distraction, is an inconvenience. It's one less video session you can be a part of. It's one less meeting that you can actually be in close quarters with your teammates. It's one less practice huddle you can be in with your teammates. And again, this isn't to disparage Cam Newton. This isn't about whether or not you should get vaccinated. It's entirely his own choice. It's his own prerogative whether or not he wants to. But the reality is, by putting yourself in this situation right now, you might have just cost yourself the only remaining opportunity to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. And I think, unfortunately, Cam Newton probably didn't really think about that. Now Mac Jones may seize this opportunity from him altogether. So I understand Cam Newton wanting to stick to his principles. I appreciate that. It's important to have that backbone, to stick to what you believe in, but that may have just cost him the starting job. And I think that right now, when you have such a close quarterback competition and you've got a guy who's waiting in the wings that could potentially usurp your role if you're not available all the time, that's something you need to be cognizant of. And I think right now, Cam Newton is probably the starter. 55% is probably for Cam. 45% is for Mac Jones. But those numbers, they could teeter a little bit. And they could start to swing a little bit more in the direction of Mac Jones. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Bill Belichick opted to start the rookie, although I do think he will go with Cam Newton because it's only 5 days. I think that if we were to go back to 2020 and you had to be out at least 2 weeks, well, now maybe Mac Jones is going to be the starter. The fact that it's only 5 days, I think, is enough time where it's not totally life-crushing for the Patriots, where you can still have Cam Newton be the starter. But again, I just think it's one of those situations where Bill Belichick doesn't want to compromise. He doesn't want any inconveniences that are going to bring his whole ship down. And that might be the cause of it. So another interesting development out of the Baltimore Ravens camp, Lamar Jackson. So there are a couple reports that came out that different coaches, different executives, different people within the NFL circles were claiming that this year the NFL is going to figure out Lamar Jackson. So Lamar Jackson obviously saw these reports and he strongly rebuffed them, saying, I strongly doubt it. I strongly doubt that they're going to catch up and catch on to his style of play. Now, just for some context, because I think context is important. This is a guy in Lamar Jackson who just won the NFL MVP 2 years ago, became the youngest quarterback ever to win the MVP, threw for over 3,000 yards, rushed for over 1,200 yards, was very, very efficient with his touchdown to interception ratio. Is fantastic. 36 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, a guy that led the Ravens to a 14-2 record. Yes, they got bounced in the first round. Really, I should say that they had a bye in the wild card. They lost in the divisional round to the Tennessee Titans. But that was his first full year as a starter. So the following year, when he actually missed a game, when the league was supposed to have figured out Lamar Jackson after his MVP season, he follows it up with over 2,700 passing yards, over 1,000 rushing yards, 26 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. And he leads the Ravens to an 11-5 COVID-racked season, in which they actually won a playoff game for the first time in his career. That was how the league figured out Lamar Jackson. That's how they bottled him up. They contained Lamar Jackson. And typically we know that, especially when it comes to quarterbacks, if a quarterback has a successful season, normally the following year there's a report on them that kind of lays out and designs a way to try and limit their strengths and prevent them from being quite as effective as they normally would have been. That's what typically happens. So the season after Lamar Jackson won his first MVP, again, at the youngest ever quarterback to win an MVP at 22 years of age, he leads the Ravens back to the playoffs, has another stellar season. So that was his production after he won the MVP. But the thing is, what coaches started to realize was, okay, listen, if the Baltimore Ravens are going to utilize so many run plays for their quarterback, and we're not really sure if he can throw it down the field too far, well, the strategy is, okay, well, let's just bring an extra defender up to the box, crowd the line of scrimmage, show 8 guys, and let the DBs defend the wide receivers one-on-one. And that strategy works if you don't have a talented wide receiving core. But the problem is now, when you don't have explosive individual wide receiving talents, maybe that can work. But now they got the former Kansas City Chief standout in Sammy Watkins. You still have Marquise Brown. You still have your tight end Mark Andrews. I love Devin Duvernay out of Texas. I love the recent draft pick Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. These are some guys that can play now. And so I don't know if that's a strategy you can employ and actually have it work, because, again, that was the perceived outlook on Lamar, was that this is a guy that can't really throw the ball and can only run the ball. And while that might have been true earlier on in his career, the reality is we've never seen a quarterback so explosive, so electric running the football at the quarterback position ever. We've never seen it. Michael Vick, as great as he wasn't this electric run as a runner from a quarterback position. Neither is Kyler Murray, neither is Russell Wilson, neither is Cam Newton, who was a great runner, more of a physical brute quarterback who could run the football. So when I hear stuff like, well, we're going to contain Lamar Jackson, that's under the assumption that your previous strategy is going to work. That's under the assumption that Lamar Jackson won't get better throwing the football. That's under the assumption that John Harbaugh and Greg Roman won't adjust some of their game plans, won't start to design some new plays that are more favorable for Lamar Jackson, will allow him to flourish in his passing game a little bit more, that feature him and his skill sets a little bit differently. That's under the assumption that his own coaches aren't going to make their own adjustments to his style of play. So, yes, can he be a little bit slightly more predictable as a quarterback than others? Sure. But to say, when you factor in the regular season, it's one thing if you were to come to me, or you say to Lamar Jackson, hey, Lamar, once we reach the postseason, we are going to figure you out. That's more feasible. That's more believable, given that you have more time to prepare and hone in on one guy. You create an entire game plan around one guy. In the regular season, constant changing schedules, the individual prep time that you have between games, it isn't the same in the regular season as it is in the postseason. He's a much more difficult player to prepare for in the regular season, especially than in the postseason. So again, I just think when you have innate raw athleticism and talent like he has, obviously it's audacious to say that you will contain a guy that just won an MVP in his first year as a starting quarterback. I think that's a little bit ridiculous to me. Same thing with Patrick Mahomes. He obviously won a Super Bowl in his second year, was the MVP his first year as a starter. So I just don't think – I still predict that Lamar Jackson's probably going to throw for over 3,000 yards, or at least near 3,000 yards. He'll probably rush for over 1,000 yards. Now, the only thing so I think he individually will have a fantastic season. The only thing that's going to derail the Baltimore Ravens as a team and their team success is the fact that they play in perhaps the second toughest division in football in the AFC North. And they've got the second most difficult schedule in the NFL this upcoming season. So if anything's going to derail them this year, it's not going to be Lamar Jackson's talent and opposing coaches figuring him out. No, it will be the brutal gauntlet of a schedule that they'll have to traverse and battle through. That's the only thing that's going to serve as an impediment to Lamar Jackson and his individual success. It's just the schedule. That's the only thing. So, again, you hear all this optimism around that coaches say all the time the following season. Oh, we're going to shut down this guy. No, you're not. No, you're not. Now, the one team that you might be able to say, hey, we're gonna shut them down is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they were dealt another major blow yesterday. Their second first-round draft pick, running back Travis Etienne out of Clemson, suffered a foot injury. It's a Lisfranc foot fracture that will cause him to likely miss the entire season. Again, this is a huge, huge blow to a team that really has a dearth of weapons, dearth of talent. And you know the famous adage, the rich keep getting richer, the poor keep getting poorer. And unfortunately, this applies to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who already entering the season were just bereft of talent and beset with deficiencies and issues and dysfunction. And all this drama, all this dysfunction, all this disarray that's clouded the Jacksonville Jaguars in the preseason alone is now, again, coming to the forefront right now, before we even start the season. And for all of Trevor Lawrence's life, for all of his life, he's been privileged. And not in a bad way. He's been very fortunate. He's been naturally gifted. He grew up in an affluent family. He was a winner every single place he went. He, as a freshman at Cartersville High School in Georgia, he became the starting quarterback. He won 2 state championships in Georgia. Then he enrolls at Clemson, wins the national championship his freshman year at Clemson. Reached 3 total, but two following his championship, but 3 consecutive trips to the NCAA championship national football title game. It's all been deserving. He's an extremely talented, naturally gifted player. And obviously, when you have that much success at the high school level, at the college level, you deserve all the effusive praise and adulation that gets heaped onto you. And obviously, naturally, expectations will be heaped onto you as well. But the reward for all of that hard work is that you typically get drafted by a poorly run franchise. And in the NFL, when you have a top quarterback draft pick, you're typically drafted by a dysfunctional, by a poorly managed franchise, a team that's bereft of talent. That's typically what happens. But the one thing that can offset that rookie quarterbacks absolutely must have, they absolutely need to have to be successful, especially in that first year, is stability. And when you think about the Jacksonville Jaguars and how they've been defined so far this preseason, it's been by utter disarray and instability. Those have been the 2 ways to define the Jacksonville Jaguars this year. You think about everything that's taken place. Urban Meyer, your new head coach, he hires for one day the former Iowa strength and conditioning coach, who was accused of being a racist for using racial slurs at Iowa. So you have to fire him the day after you bring him in. Then we've got the whole Tim Tebow fiasco. Is he a quarterback? Is he a tight end? Is he actually trying out for the Jacksonville Jaguars? Is he going to make the roster? Is he going to make the team? Oh, wow, he made it past the first round of cuts. Is he going to make the actual 53-man roster? You have all of that as a whirlwind as the backdrop. And now, to make matters worse, you've got the one source of stability, the one source of comfort for a guy in Trevor Lawrence, his former teammate at Clemson for several years, in Travis Etienne, and really one of the only weapons that they actually have at their disposal that was going to be featured a lot in the offense this year for Jacksonville, and he's likely now done for the entire season. The only weapons they already had without Travis Etienne was DJ Chark Jr. and Marvin Jones Jr., who are good wide receivers, but I don't even know if DJ Chark is a number one caliber wide receiver. Maybe he's a fringe number one caliber wide receiver at best. But now you've got no more depth at the running back position. Your offensive line isn't great. Your defense gave up the second most points and second most yards per game last year. Yeah, you signed Shaq Griffin, but they're not that much better this year than they were last year. And again, it's just compounded by your star running back, the guy that you took in the first round. Now he's done for the year. So as a reward for all these accomplishments for Trevor Lawrence, for all the success he had, he gets to inherit this mess. He gets to inherit this team that's just already been ravaged by injuries and beset with deficiencies and all these issues. That's his reward. So, again, I think it obviously deals a major blow to Urban Meyer along with Trevor Lawrence, but this is an opportunity now for us to truly see the genius of Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence. Urban Meyer has been lauded as an incredible play caller, an incredible motivator at Ohio State. We'll see if that will translate to the NFL level. And Trevor Lawrence is supposed to have talent that can transcend even the worst of circumstances, even the worst team. So we'll see if those two can overcome this additional blow dealt to him. And then there's been all this bogus fodder that's been floating around about the potential rumors and the debates of whether or not Trevor Lawrence should actually play this year, whether the Jacksonville Jaguars should just rest him the whole season. I think that's ludicrous. I think that's absolutely bogus. You look historically, there have been so many quarterbacks that were extremely talented, taken number one overall, that inherited terrible teams. Peyton Manning, 1998, drafted number one overall by the Colts. That season, they went 3-13 his rookie year. Well, what did they do the following year? He followed that up with a 13-3 season. You look at John Elway with the Broncos. He was 4-6 his first year, 12-2 the second year. Terry Bradshaw, the first 2 years Terry Bradshaw was in the NFL, he was 8-13 record his first 2 years in the NFL. They did not win. Then he follows that up with an 11-3 season, and he goes on to win 4 Super Bowls with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, yeah, the first year might suck for Trevor Lawrence, might be terrible, but that's something you just have to play through. That's something you just have to play through, and it's as simple as that. But, wow, that's just a major blow, though, to a team that could ill afford to have another key cog go down. They could not afford to see that happen. Transitioning to soccer, this was a pretty groundbreaking story. Now, before this, and this being that Killian Mbappe has apparently formally informed PSG that he wants to leave the soccer club. Real Madrid actually came in last night, made an offer bid for $188 million, 160 euros, to try and acquire the French international superstar soccer player. PSG rejected it. But prior to this, obviously the earth-shattering soccer news came when Lionel Messi signed with PSG, right? Leaving Barcelona after 17 years because the club had financial constraints and they had mismanaged different salaries that forced them into a bind, and he couldn't renew his contract there. So he had to leave, and he signed with PSG. That was really the only earth-shattering soccer news prior to this bombshell that was dropped today. Now, I thought that this would make actually PSG the prohibitive favorite to win not only the Champions League, but to be kind of universally looked upon as the greatest international soccer team in this upcoming year, maybe ever, given the talent that existed there. And, you know, again, this was assuming that Kylian Mbappe would have liked to have stuck around with the team, would have liked to have stuck around with PSG. So his contract obviously expires at the end of next year, which is why you're hearing all these rumblings now. And the transfer window ends August 31st. So you really have 1 week left if you're a different soccer club to try and acquire and make a trade for lack of a better term, for a star like this. And apparently he's voiced his frustrations with PSG for a while, that he intended not to re-sign there. But the thought was, after you sign Lionel Messi, that he might decide to stay, that he might want to stay, at the very least. Now, I've said this before. I think that Killian Mbappe, I absolutely am infatuated with Killian Mbappe. I think he's absolutely fantastic of a soccer player. I think right now, he's top 5, if not top 2 or 3 best soccer players in the entire world. You can make an argument he's the best soccer player in the entire world right now. I'm a huge Lionel Messi guy, but at the same time, I think that this guy, not only is he just 22 years of age right now, I think he will have a career like a Pele, like a Maradona, like a Messi, like a Ronaldo, like a Cristiano Ronaldo, like a Ronaldinho, Thierry Henry, some of the greatest who have ever played the game. That's where I view Kylian Mbappe. I see him in that type of class. That's even a level above Neymar, who is absolutely sensational of a talent. Speaks to the depth of the talent that exists right now, especially when you reach that level. And when you look at a guy like Kylian Mbappe, his accolades speak for themselves, right? 3 League One titles, 3 Copa de France titles. He won a World Cup as a 19-year-old, scored 4 goals in the World Cup, scored a goal in the World Cup final, just becoming the second teenager ever, along with Pele, to score a goal in the World Cup final. He's been the top scorer in the League One for 3 consecutive seasons. He's been the best player in the league for 2 years, been voted on by the players. This guy has had a decorated career, and not only has he been a pillar of PSG and of the soccer world, but this is a guy who's had such an illustrious career, and yet he's still just 22 years old. So not only was he a precocious soccer player, but he's also already accomplished so much as a young man. And so he's certainly earned the right. Let me be clear. He has certainly earned the right to choose where he wants to play and who he wants to play with. But I think personally, this would be a foolish decision on his part right now to leave PSG. I think he needs to really, really think about leaving PSG and whether or not that's truly the best decision for him. Because the reality is, listen, I understand from a competitive standpoint. On the one hand, it's incredible to be able to play with those 3 talents up front, Neymar, Messi, and yourself, Kylian Mbappe. So I understand from a competitive standpoint, maybe you don't feel like you'll be featured quite as much. Maybe you don't feel like you'll be the focal point of the offense as much and the central core, the face of the soccer club to the degree that you would like. I understand that. But I hope he understands that you likely will never get a chance to play with this type of level of talent ever in your career. You'll never get a chance. You'll never get another opportunity like this to play with such a decorated group. And it's not like he joined PSG when they already had Neymar and Messi. It's not like Kevin Durant joining the Warriors where they had just won, they just gone 73-9, and he was joining an already existing super team. No, Kylian Mbappe was one of the pillars of PSG with Neymar. He was the Stephen Clay to the Warriors before KD joined, before Messi came and joined. And in fact, no disrespect to Steph and Clay, but Mbappe and Neymar are probably on a higher pedestal talent-wise than those 2 guys in Golden State, which speaks to how incredibly talented they are. And so I just think he needs to take a step back, and I hope he reevaluates and reconsiders his decision. Again, I'm not suggesting that he needs to stay with PSG for his entire career. No one's saying he has to play his entire career in PSG. No one's saying he's got to play 17 years for PSG the same way that Lionel Messi played 17 years for Barcelona. No one is suggesting that. But I just think I understand the allure of Real Madrid. For the longest time, it was viewed as the greatest soccer club to exist. And right now, you look at Real Madrid, the history that exists there, along with a Barcelona and a Manchester United, it is one of the prestigious soccer clubs to join. And it's certainly an upgrade from PSG in that regard. There's no question about that. So again, I'm not saying that in 4 years, maybe 3 to 4 years, you look at taking your talents to Real Madrid or somewhere else, maybe a Manchester City, maybe a Chelsea, maybe a Liverpool, maybe a Bayern Munich, whichever club that you're interested in. But you've got a rare opportunity now to play with some special players, to play on a special team, and you may not ever get that opportunity again. So I just think that opting to leave now would be a big mistake. I personally think it would be a big mistake to leave right now, but that's just me. Lot to talk about on a Wednesday, lots to talk about. And so I want to talk about some interesting developments with college football. We obviously know that Texas and Oklahoma decided to join the SEC. And so it was just reported yesterday that the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12 have formed an official alliance. So this alliance is between the three conferences that essentially is having them collaborate on the future evolution of college athletics and the scheduling to try and benefit each other. They're trying to work together. And this comprises 41 institutions trying to work together through this alliance to restore some stability and balance in college football. That's what they're claiming. And so I said, when Oklahoma and Texas essentially defected from the Big 12 to join the SEC, I thought that this would lead to utter calamity. I thought that this would lead to the dissolution, the disintegration, and the demise of the Big 12. And what this alliance does is it further corroborates that sentiment. It further highlights just how destructive what they just did has done to college football. Because this is something that I've mentioned they meaning the Big 12, could never recover from this. I never thought that if they were to lose the bell cows, Texas and Oklahoma, they would never be able to recover from this. I don't really care if you were to ask the best non-Power 5 or FCF schools like a Houston, like a Cincinnati, like a Boise State, like a Memphis, like a UCF. I don't care who you asked to join the conference. That wasn't going to enable it personally to survive, which is why I believe that this alliance highlights that, because if you look at this alliance and who comprises this alliance, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12, who are the two conferences that aren't a part of this? Oh, I don't know. It's the SEC and the Big 12. Okay. Well, the SEC is well positioned moving forward, given that they've got 16 legitimate powerhouses or notable Division I universities in their conference. Now you're adding Texas and Oklahoma to buffer that standing. And so the only other conference that hasn't been mentioned so far is the Big 12. They've been the last one out. They're left with no allies. No allies. We saw that the Pac-12 and the ACC decided to hitch their wagon to the Big Ten because it was the Big Ten and the SEC that were atop, and the other three were just kind of waiting to see what was going to happen. And so I just think that this divide and this schism that's been created has been further perpetuated by this decision. Because again, I'm not saying that the alliance itself is inherently a bad thing, because obviously it's in response to Texas and Oklahoma basically seceding from the Big 12 to go join the SEC. That's what caused, though, this alliance to be formed, was these two schools joining the SEC. So it just threw off the balance of power. And so the thing is, when you look at it at face value, you say to yourself, well, for the Pac-12 and the ACC, this is great. This is actually pretty good, because they were kind of at the bottom of the totem pole, just ahead of the Big 12 when it comes to revenue, right? Behind the Big 10, behind the SEC, you've got the Pac-12 and the ACC. So from a financial standpoint, from a competitive standpoint, from a relevancy standpoint, for those two conferences, makes all the sense in the world after this has unfolded to go hitch your wagon to the Big 10. The Big 10 obviously had the most revenue last year, even more than the SEC. And the Big 10 also, to be honest, has had a consistent number of elite football and basketball programs, but especially football programs, for years. If you want to say, well, maybe it wasn't quite as good as the SEC on the top tier, from top to bottom, it might have been the best conference for several years, given the Ohio States, Michigans, Penn State, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota for a couple of years, Nebraska, Northwestern, very solid, big name programs. And so from a basketball perspective, sure, the Pac-12 and the ACC were fine. They were relevant. Virginia, Duke, very good basketball programs. Oregon, UCLA, USC in recent years, Arizona for the longest time in the Pac-12, very good basketball programs. But when you look at the football programs for the ACC, obviously you have Clemson and you've got Miami, and you kind of have a fledgling Florida State, whoever, if they can ever figure out their quarterback situation, or their coaching situation. So they haven't been able to stand up. And in the Pac-12, while I am very much, I do admire Oregon, I do admire USC and Washington as more notable teams, Oregon's the only team to have made a college football playoff, and that was years ago. In fact, that was actually the first time that the college football playoff existed. That's how long it's been. They haven't been back. No team has represented the Pac-12. So in football, they were kind of lacking some vitality in both of those conferences. So I get it. It makes perfect sense. And for the Pac-12 and the ACC, I get it. You wanted to attach yourself to the next best conference you could latch onto. And that's the Big 10. But again, this is kind of just an insurance plan, because it kind of protects the backs of the ACC and the Pac-12, where I guess it protects the Big Ten a little bit too, to be able to structure your schedule so that you guys, those conferences, can remain relevant. But again, I'm not wanting to bash this alliance, but what I do think is that this alliance is an unfortunate byproduct of Texas and Oklahoma leaving. And so once again, the real odd man out is the Big 12. And I said they wouldn't be able to recover from it. I don't think they're going to recover from it. And if anything, this alliance further corroborates that. And now they're trapped and they're stuck in quicksand. And they're just slowly kind of getting chased down. It's like by a Zamboni, slowly chasing them down. But it's going to get there. It's going to clean up all the ice on the ice rink. It will get there. The Zamboni does that eventually. And that's what it feels like right now, watching the Big 12 just have to absorb everything that's in front of them. That's just my thinking. Final topic before my Malkins moments. So this was another just kind of devastating news to morale, at least for me as a tennis fan. Serena Williams has just announced her withdrawal from the U.S. Open. She turned 40. She's made the semifinals the last two hard court tournaments since she's come back from maternity leave in 2018. She has reached a Grand Slam final 4 times. Unfortunately, she's lost all of those times. Last won a Grand Slam title in 2017 at the Australian Open when she was in the first trimester of her pregnancy. Yes, it was absolutely sensational that she was able to win that. Unfortunately, it's starting to feel like ages ago now, approaching 4 or 5 years in the making. And she's won the U.S. Open 6 times, the last time in 2014, but every single year since 2014 at the U.S. Open, she has made it to at least the semifinals. And obviously the finals, she's made it 2 straight years in 2018, 2019. She's obviously at 23 Grand Slams, which is the second most women's singles championships, singles titles. But obviously in the professional era, it's the most since 1968. I mean, Margaret Court has the record of 24, but you look at the dominance displayed by Serena Williams, and most people regard her as the greatest female tennis player ever. And this is actually the first time since 1997 that either, or really I shouldn't say either, but that Serena Williams, Roger Federer, and Rafael Nadal were all not a part of the main singles draw. First time since 1997. It's unbelievable, the extension of their greatness, the duration of their greatness. And for me, I'm not going to touch on this too much. I'm only going to spend a couple minutes with this. I just think that it's an unfortunate, sobering reality seeing all these elite, high-profile tennis players start to get up in age. We all think that, and me included, that they're invincible, that they're immortal, that they will stay at the tops of their games for eternity, in perpetuity. And when I hear another report about, well, now Serena Williams is forced to withdraw again because of the hamstring tear that she injured several months ago, it's just saddening. It's really saddening to me because I respect the hell out of Serena Williams. I personally think that she's the greatest female tennis player ever. I think that there's an argument to be made that she's one of the greatest male or female, just athletes ever in sports, given the greatness that she's displayed, given the age that she started being great, the dominance that she's had. I'm just so appreciative of what she's meant to the game of tennis, what she's meant to the sport, what she's meant to sports worldwide. And for her, again, not to be playing in this tournament, I don't want to overreact, but I do think, listen, Father Time has been tapping people on the shoulder. I guess you could say Mother Time in this instance. And it's just a sobering reality that all of our favorite athletes are just aging or getting older. And we have to cherish the moments now that we have to see all these athletes play. Whomever your favorite athlete is, they're getting up in age. And when they do, it's important to, I think, take a step back and reflect and say, thank you for all the greatness that you've displayed for so long. We've taken it for granted. Serena Williams is another one of these perfect examples of a player that we've taken for granted her greatness. And her stats and her finishes at all these tournaments obviously substantiates that, has backed that up. The number of times she's reached the finals of tournaments, it's amazing. And so, again, selfishly, because I'm going to the U.S. Open, I would have loved to have seen Serena Williams play. It's disheartening that she won't be there. From a personal, selfish standpoint, I would have loved to have seen her, but of course she has to take care of her health, and I hope that she can also make a full return to health, just like I hope for the same for Federer, just like I hope for the same for Rafael Nadal. But Serena Williams has meant so much to the U.S. Open. If you've watched tennis and you see the types of reaction and the types of applause that she gets, the ovations that she gets at the U.S. Open specifically, not that she doesn't receive it at Wimbledon or at the French Open or at the Australian Open, but in her home country, in the U.S., the type of greeting that she is received by and received with it's a touching and it's a heartwarming moment every single time it happens. And so I hope that she has a speedy recovery. Thank you for all the greatness that you've displayed. I'm hoping this isn't the end for her too, but just unfortunate and sobering news to hear that she won't be participating in one of my favorite events, sporting events, every single season. So wishing her a speedy recovery for that. Final topic, my Malkins moments. Have a couple interesting Malkins moments for you. Again, love giving a chance to shout out some individuals that otherwise may have not been given a moment's glory or a special play. I have to start to incorporate more videos to highlight some of these, because some of these are always backed by a video, but I don't always have the video at my disposal. But in golf, Tony Finau wins the Northern Trust. The golf tournament, he beat Cam Smith in a playoff to earn his second PGA victory. His first PGA victory, though, in the last 5 years. It's been more than 5 years since he's won a PGA tournament. In fact, actually, the last time that he won a PGA tournament was in 1,975 days. That's how long it's been, specifically on the day. And now he's rocking a new look. He's growing out the beard a little bit. No more clean shaven. I like this Tony Finau. He's a really great golfer, a really great person. I've seen his interviews. I've listened to a lot of his interviews. He seems like a really genuine guy, so I'm happy for him that he's finally able to get back atop the pedestal in golf. Shout out to Evan Mobley, the third overall pick in the NBA draft from the Cleveland Cavaliers. He bought his brother Isaiah Mobley a nice car for his birthday. There is a video that accompanies that. And again, not that we should expect that wealthy basketball players or wealthy draft picks should be purchasing nice gifts for their family members, but when they do, I do think that it's a nice gesture. And Evan Mobley, I've had a chance to personally interview him. I've spoken to him a couple of times. He's always been an extremely humble, extremely generous, extremely approachable individual, and this isn't a surprise at all. I think he's going to have a great career, and I love seeing gestures like this of family members supporting one another. Again, you can say it's a little bit, if people aren't appreciative of and are envious of the wealth that they have and think they're just doling it out, you're entitled to that opinion, but I think it's a really nice gesture. It's not something that's required when you make money to buy your sibling something nice for their birthday. He did it anyway, and that's a big shout out to him. Big shout out to Brandon Belt of the San Francisco Giants. Unfortunately, there was some tragic news. His grandma passed away recently, and he was forced to play a baseball game, but he came out in her honor, hit 2 home runs in their 8-0 victory over the New York Mets yesterday. So not only did he have a heavy heart, but he had a heavy bat, and it displayed 2 runs. And again, I want to give him a shout out because I understand what it's like when you lose a grandparent, and for him to come out in those circumstances and still be able to not only play baseball at a high level, but to hit his 19th home run of the season, which is a career best as well. That's a career best in a season for Brandon Belt. He's hit 19 home runs this year. The Giants have been the best team in baseball so far. They've got the best record. They were the first team to win 80 games. And so big shout out to him for being able to produce on a special night. And he's obviously said that the rest of the season will be he's dedicating the rest of the season to his grandma. So shout out to Brandon Belt. Finally, I wish I had the video of this to show you, but the Dodgers, AJ Pollock, the Dodgers played the San Diego Padres yesterday. There was a Manny Machado fly ball that seemed like it was going to be a home run into dead center. All the fans were starting to swarm towards the ball. Their hands were out. AJ Pollock snatches that away, nearly knocked off the blinds here, nearly snatched it away. And there's an epic viral picture of the facial expressions of the fans as AJ Pollock had his glove fully extended out into the stands. It was not only an incredible catch, but a turning point in that game. The Dodgers have won 10 of their last 11 games. They're rolling, and that's a major Malkins moment there. That's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me every single Monday and Wednesday morning on Morning Joe right here, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to like, review, subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin. Follow me on Twitter at morning_Joe_ at Jonah Malkin, or follow me on Instagram, jmalk97. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.